back to our special coverage of Super Tuesday here on OU Nightly. Bernie Sanders is speaking at a rally in Vermont, and Lindsay Gomez joins us now in the News Center to give us an update on that. Lindsay?
Bernie said this campaign is not just about electing a president, but about transforming America. He added that this election is meant to build the United States up to its fullest potential. He also took a jab at Donald Trump when he spoke about the diversity in America.
Political revolution is bringing our people together, black and white, Latino, Asian American, gay and straight, people born in America, people who have immigrated to America. When we bring our people together, when we do not allow the Donald Trumps of the world to divide us up.
I will continue giving updates as more polling information comes through, but for now, back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Lindsay. As legislators are proposing multiple solutions to Oklahoma's low teacher salary, but so far there is little hope for any of them passing. So as OU Nightly's Clark Sachs tells us, teachers are looking for leadership from the top and a president who's committed to improving education.
Everyone I know has a second job or has a husband who makes twice as much as them. Like, that's the only way you can get by if you're a teacher. It's just not possible.
With teachers in Oklahoma not seeing a base salary raise since 2008, being a teacher in the state has become tougher than ever. Many teachers are finding it difficult to get by with such low wages.
I also have side jobs. I've actually, I tutor like 5 children after school. I also drive Uber. I've had to take on several side jobs.
And while low teacher pay is forcing an estimated 50% or more of new teachers out of state, it's creating a brain drain and a teacher shortage in the state of Oklahoma.
We're losing a lot of great teachers to Texas and to all the surrounding states because they get paid a lot more there.
But some continue to stick around to try and make a difference.
My mom said something to me at one point, and she said, if you leave, then who's going to save us?
I love my job, yeah. I definitely do it, and it's not for the money. By the end of kindergarten, they're reading, and it's just, I mean, that's where you get your paycheck, is right there.
Although the few left in Oklahoma are doing it for much more than the money, teachers are still hoping for some help from the state, and they are looking for a presidential candidate who makes education a high priority. Clark Sachs, OU Nightly.
New bills with proposed increases for teacher pay will be voted on in November.
And Oklahoma has one of the highest poverty rates in the nation. Nightly's Lindsay Gomez explores the importance of income disparity in this year's presidential race.
I sat down with a group of millennial voters right here on campus. They told me all of their issues on this election cycle, including social justice and economics, but what stood out most...
Sorry for that, but can we first get into a little bit about the difference between delegates and superdelegates and how those affect both sides, Democrat and Republican?
Absolutely. So delegates are the link that tie a popular vote to a candidate delegate at the National Convention. And so what the delegates do is they pledge or they promise to represent the popular vote at the National Convention. A superdelegate, though, is an unpledged or unpromised delegate, meaning that they really have no obligation to vote a specific way when the parties have their conventions.
And yeah, how is that going to affect the Oklahoma race and then on a national perspective?
Sure. So it's a bit less important for the Republican side because they have less of them. With the Democrats, there is some 700 supers, and so depending on whom these officials like, it can really shape how this race will play out.
Now we've got some updated Oklahoma poll numbers. Braden, what can you tell us about the latest on that?
Well, both still close to call, Republican and Democratic here in the Sooner State. Right now, Ben Carson and John Kasich being the low men on the totem pole. Cruz, Rubio, and Trump all pretty close within 10 percentage points. Trump getting the majority of the vote right now, 34%. Oklahoma is really a different race for both Republicans and Democrats. You don't have to do well in the cities in Oklahoma, and if you're a Republican, to do well overall in the primaries. Trump has a lot of supporters in rural Oklahoma right now with those 6 percentage precincts reporting, and you can really be able to conglomerate those voters together to do well. Now the Democrats on the other side are largely in the cities. Clinton 50%, Sanders 44%, still too close to call right now. But if you don't do well in the cities, if you're a Democrat, then you don't have a very good chance. So Clinton, Sanders both doing equally as well right now. Oklahoma City, Edmond, Tulsa as well. Back to the Lone Star State. Republicans is tightening up a little bit between Ted Cruz and Trump. Cruz is home state, but not pulling away like we were expecting him to do in the Lone Star State. 39% of the vote with 4% of the precincts reporting, 30% for Trump. Rubio a bit of a distant 22 points behind for Cruz, and Carson and Kasich not even a contest for them right now. 4%, but with, again, 4% of the districts reporting. Democrats, a little bit different story. Still not ready to call it quite yet. 68% for Hillary Clinton, 30% for Sanders in the Lone Star State. Right now, Clinton has a projected, we were talking about delegates and super delegates right now, with her wins already already earlier on in South Carolina, Iowa, and other states as well. She has 661 projected delegates of the 2,383 needed to win, with Bernie only having a little bit over 100 right now. So guys, right now, not much of a contest. Clinton is doing much better in Texas and some other states as well. But right now, Ashley, go for it.
Thank you. And as Braden just told us, we have Clinton with 68% and Bernie Sanders and 30% in Texas. But now Sanders has no shortage of support in Tulsa. Nightly's Dylan Jasna shows us some students back at the University of Oklahoma question some of his more passionate promises.
That's right. Last week I sat down with a group of millennial voters right here on campus. They told me all of their issues on this election cycle, including social justice and economics. But what stood out most in this forum was Bernie Sanders' ambitious promise for free education.
The younger demographic is probably going to be more gearing toward Bernie just because of the whole free tuition.
I'm really leaning towards Bernie Sanders.
Even though only one student supported Bernie, his free education policy was the hottest topic that evening.
In middle school, if the class president promises like free pizza, no homework if you vote for him, that sort of feels a little bit what Bernie is doing with free college tuition.
I hear a lot that he's not realistic with what he's promising, and so if he doesn't know like economically what damage it could do, then I don't know how much he could be trusted.
Our political expert here at the university weighed in on the issue.
There's a limit to what you can promise, but you promise in order to get people to show up. And any smart person knows you're not going to get everything you were promised. That's just the hallmark of being an adult.
Most surprisingly, some in this group labeled their generation as emotionally entitled voters, lacking a strong work ethic.
He's just appealing to their emotional side, and I pray to God that it won't have an effect.
Decisive issues like these are the reason why Clinton and Sanders are not only neck and neck in the nation, but right here in the Sooner State. Currently, we hold the closest Democratic race out of any other state voting this Super Tuesday, pushing Oklahoma into the spotlight of national politics. Dylan Jasna, OU Nightly.
Sanders and Clinton are currently... Okay, so what can you tell us about how you think these students are reacting, because there's a lot of stuff going around about how all millennials are all gung-ho Bernie Sanders and all just
feel the burn.
But obviously some people aren't. Jason, what can you tell us about some stuff like that?
So with Sanders supporters, they do tend to be younger. Younger voters also don't tend to go out to vote very often. Yeah. And so it puts Sanders in this quandary of there's a lot of excitement there, but there's not always a lot of turnout. And so this could be a problem in the long term for him.
Yes, especially in the primaries where younger voters are even likelier to participate in the process. So he's got this huge online presence. Everybody's feeling the burn. Everybody's tweeting about it, Instagramming it. But when it actually comes to today, will they actually go out and vote in the primaries? Based on what we know from the past, it doesn't look likely. And so that certainly is impacting why we're saying, wow, Bernie Sanders should be doing so well, but in fact, he's not.
Right. So if we go back a little bit, we just had our update from Braden about Okay, well now we're going to go to Braden with new Georgia numbers. Braden, what can you tell us?
Yeah, we're ready to call a couple more states already. Georgia and Vermont as well. Republican race. Trump, 46%, not even close to Ted Cruz's 22. Marco Rubio's 21. Like a lot of the rest of the states, Carson and Kasich really not that much of a factor, with 10 or 12% of the districts reporting Trump dominating in the Peach State as well. 46%, almost half, which is none of these states are winner-take-all states, but That's going to be an overwhelming amount of delegates ready for the businessman. Now in Georgia, Clinton, even stronger lead right now over Bernie Sanders, 76% in Georgia, 23% for Bernie Sanders right now, leaving about a 1% error margin right there. 7% of the districts reporting for Georgia. Clinton, again, campaigning hard in the southern states, expected to do well in the southern states, and lives up to it as well. Just about an even more extreme difference in Vermont, though, for Bernie Sanders' home state. 88% of the vote compared to Clinton's 12%. No surprise there for the former mayor and representative and now senator from Vermont. 7% of the districts reporting. Back over to the Republican side for Vermont right now, still a little bit too close to call. Donald Trump right now with a little bit more than 30% of the vote up in the Green Mountain State. 9% Cruz, not even a factor. 29% Kasich, one of his stronger states up in the Northeast. Rubio 20%, and Carson at 5% with 7% of the districts reporting. We'll continue to update these closer races like in Vermont, here in Oklahoma as well. But for right now, Georgia and Vermont are ready to go to Clinton and Sanders respectively. Right now, Republican race still too close to call in Vermont. Back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Braden. So, Jason, what do you think about those numbers, both the Republicans and the Democrat numbers?
Yeah, well, I think so far we're not surprised that Sanders has won Vermont.
Right.
It's his home state, and so we expect generally that a candidate wins their home state, and so that was not that surprising. The other numbers still digesting it some, but. Do you have thoughts on it?
And candidate Kasich is doing really well there. He's really focused a lot of his attention on the East Coast, and he certainly knows that that's where he's appealing very well to his constituency. And so we're seeing in these results that has really paid off for him. Whether or not it will work out in the long term, we'll still have to see.
And speaking of home states, going back to Texas, what do you think about Donald Trump catching up to Ted Cruz? Because we thought that Ted Cruz would definitely pull away since that is his home state.
Yeah, so that is definitely worrisome for the Cruz campaign. If I were working on it, I would definitely be worried about the close margins he has there. Normally, people from their home states are just able to sweep the entire thing. And so the fact that Trump is down 10 points is really, really nerve-wracking. It should be for Ted Cruz. And so that's an interesting little development that we're seeing so far. Jason, what do you think?
Well, and if this goes south here and Cruz can't hold his lead and Rubio gets closer, it's putting Rubio in striking range now, and so there's multi levels of problems here. So,
what exactly would be striking range for Rubio in this perspective?
If Rubio keeps coming in second place, there is the possibility that he wins overall.
Yeah.
Just because Trump hasn't won everything all the time, and so he doesn't have all of the counts.
Can you explain that just a little bit more in depth for our viewers?
Yeah. So the way that this works is by the convention, a candidate has to reach a certain number of votes. Because Rubio has had a consistent second place performance, or second place ish, he keeps getting votes. And if he keeps at that pathway, if Trump struggles here on out, if he's placing second or third, it's possible that he catches up.
It's kind of like that steady pace wins the race.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
And if the establishment Republican Party decides that it no longer wants to be associated with Donald Trump, or there is some split in the party, they'll immediately turn to whoever is a strong lead following Trump. And so Rubio certainly wants to be positioned well in that way.
So going back with the Republican Party and Trump, whenever he signed that letter of intent to be considered a Republican, does that hold any weight if the Republican Party wants to cut ties with him? Would that come into play, or is that just on his end?
It's kind of more on his end. It's a fun party trick. I mean, there's nothing that can be done to enforce it or not enforce it, really, in practicality. And so it's just a fancy pledge at its core.
Okay, and it looks like we have some more updates. We have Texas and Oklahoma, but Braden, I think we're going to go to Texas poll updates first.
Yep, right now, still a close race in Texas for the Republican Party right now. But Carson's still way out of it. Trump has gone down 1% to 29%. Rubio risen up to 20%. Still too close to call. 19% of the districts reporting Ted Cruz, as we've been talking about, not doing as well in his home state as we expected. Kasich and Carson still not really a threat. as much as the other three are. Cruz really, as we have been saying, comparatively struggling in his home state to what we thought he would be doing. The Democratic race also still too close to call, but pretty big margin, 40 points, 41 points actually. Clinton at 70%, Sanders at 29% as well. Going back here to Oklahoma, where we said it's the closest race for Democrats and pretty close for Republicans as well. 4-point spread, that's it. 8 precincts reporting, 33% Trump, 29% Cruz. Rubio's very close behind, 24%, reflective of what we saw in the Sooner polls and Monmouth University as well. Kasich and Carson not a factor. Democratic race, too close to call. Still too close to call. Gonna be close for a while. 49% for Clinton, 45% for Sanders. Campaigning heavy. Bill Clinton, or former President Bill Clinton, being here twice in the last week here in the Sooner State. Sanders being in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, as we already talked about. Really realizing that Oklahoma is, this campaign, a true battleground state, guys.
Thank you, Braden. And once again, we are joined with Lucia Nelson and Jason Pedlo. Could you just give us your insights on those numbers, on Oklahoma, about how close it is between both parties in that matter?
Yeah. So what's not surprising here is that Trump and Sanders are doing well. We expected that with voters frustrated, upset at the system, that outsider candidates would do well. So it's not terribly surprising that they're doing good. What's a little interesting is that how close everybody else is to them. The margins here are very slim.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, too, because Ted Cruz isn't doing very well at home, but he's doing fairly well with his neighbors up north. So what does that say about him as a candidate? It'll be interesting to see how he actually ultimately pulls out in both states, both Texas and Oklahoma.
Why do you think that is that he would be doing so well in Oklahoma but not in his home state?
Well, back in Texas, Ted Cruz is a relatively new senator, so we don't really have quite the rapport with him as some states might, like Bernie Sanders in Vermont. Vermont just loves Bernie, but Bernie's been representing them for quite a while now, whereas Ted Cruz, Texas is still trying to feel out how they feel about him as a senator, whether or not he's a good representative, so that might be part of it. There's also a lot more diverse interests represented in Texas, and there could be a very sizable number of Texans who don't feel that Ted Cruz has done a good job of protecting their interests, whereas Oklahoma, the voters are a little more similar, and they might all be drawn to the same candidate.
Okay, and we now have Patrick Smith at Nelson Hall on OU's campus. They'll be joining us now. Patrick?
Thank you, guys. Here at OU in Nelson Hall, students have gathered to watch the results of the 2016 presidential primary elections. There are both Democratic and Republican supporters in the room right now. They're eating pizza, getting along great, watching the results on the screen. I'll send it back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Awesome. Well, with in the recent caucuses and everything that we've been having, Trump has just come off what I call the Trump thumps. He's he's just been dominating that run that he had, and now he's running up. He's facing a little more competition here. Why do you think that is, and what can you tell us about that?
So I think part of it is that the field is becoming smaller. What we've seen is Trump is winning by 30 to 40% kind of consistently. And so what that means is there's another 60 to 70% of Republican voters that don't want him. And so as the field winnows, it seems that voters are shifting. And so Trump is not so much losing ground as he's actually facing more competition now.
Absolutely. And he's also had some really controversial statements coming out lately. Some behaviors at his rallies aren't particularly creating warm, fuzzy feelings about people or around people who might otherwise be leaning towards him. If they don't like these cues that they're getting from their candidate, it's a lot likelier that they'll stay home or they'll sit back a little bit longer and wait to make a decision on him.
So what would be worse for him? People sitting at home and not voting, or people going out and voting, whether it's for him or against him?
At this point, people going out and voting against him would be the worst thing that could happen, because as Jason mentioned, we're starting to narrow down the Republican field, and so the more people that go and join a different candidate, the harder it's going to be for Donald Trump to keep the momentum he has or gain even more momentum.
So bringing this all together, we've talked about how we've been seeing a lot more ads here in Oklahoma, and with all these tight races, the candidates hit Oklahoma with just ads, so many ads happening, and with an effort to turn undecided voters their way. Nightly's Haley Huey has that story.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
Unlike Iowa and New Hampshire, Oklahoma isn't a state that usually sees many political ads. However, this primary, Oklahomans are seeing something different. Democratic candidates spending a lot of money on TV advertisements.
All the races are up in the air right now, and that means that Oklahoma may actually play a role this year. In past years, maybe not as much.
Ads like these can cost a candidate up to $800 per slot. So far, Bernie Sanders has spent $400,000 in Oklahoma, which is $100,000 more than he spent in Massachusetts. Hillary Clinton plans to match him.
The fact that the primary is open on the Democratic side on March 1st, that independents who've previously been shut out of primaries in this state actually have an opportunity to vote in a primary. Now, that could lead to increased excitement and interest in the Democratic primary.
Republican candidates have been slower to purchase presidential ad space. Political media experts say that will most likely change before Super Tuesday.
We've seen a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to outcomes. So on the Democratic side, we have more of a contest than we thought we would.
We won't know till Tuesday who will win the Oklahoma primary, but we already know who one big winner is. Local TV news stations. Haley Huey, OU Nightly.
Thanks, Haley. And we're going to take a little bit of a break now, but hang out and we'll be right back with some more analysis and new numbers.